Martin is from Germany and Bianca is originally from Brazil, but they both live down in a crockery, and their project down there, they I won't say they farm, but they garden. And Bianca is a composer, a musician, so she's just recently got a grant from the Arts Council to record her new album, or her first album. We can look forward to that going forward. Could I ask you all, please, to put your phones on silent for the presentation? Because Martin is actually going to be recording this from the streets, if that's okay. He's going to be what he's telling us he's going to be recording. Martin will explain what he does, okay, because he does things so well. He has a huge following online, on Facebook and on Instagram. Thousands of people.
And YouTube. Yeah.
And all his videos, they have about 300 videos, and all of them are free to view on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. So it's fantastic. It's a great resource and a great facility to have. Let's enjoy what Martin and Bianca have to show us. Thank you so much, everybody.
Well, thanks for the lovely introduction, and thank you for all coming today. And so what we do is actually we do homesteading. So what that means, it's kind of like farming on a small scale, on a home scale. So we don't grow all the food that we actually eat. So we do go to the shop every week, or even twice a week sometimes. But we try to produce some of the things that we eat anyway. So like, for example, eggs and kale and some of the other vegetables and all the berries and fruit as well. But all of the produce is seasonal. So the idea is to actually be more in tune with the seasons and to eat with the seasons as well. And our 6-year-old boy, he always runs around the garden, and different times of the year, he'd eat different things, like whatever is in season that time of the year. So one of the things I'd like to show you is our garden. So we have, we're just up on Scrine Hill, or near Scrine Hill there, the other side of Knockcrockery. And we're on an acre with our cottage. So we call it Birdland Cottage. And Bianca's studio is actually called Birdland Studio because there's a lot of birds. And that was always our dream, to have a place full of birds. And we feed them with all the berry bushes. Of course, you'd rather eat the berries yourself. So we use a more natural approach to gardening. So our motto is actually work with nature, and Gardens for Life is the name of the business and our YouTube channel. There's actually cards here as well, a business card. If you want to bring one with you, you're very welcome to. If you'd like to take a look at our videos on the internet afterwards. And we like to teach people no-dig gardening. So no-dig means basically you're not plowing the ground, you're not digging up all of the old weed seeds that are way below the surface, and you're not bringing them up to the surface for them to germinate. So when you're digging, it's extra work, as you can imagine. If any of you that have done gardening, it's quite frustrating if you're only getting started and you have all this hard work to do to get rid of the grass and to dig. And so we don't take that approach at all. Especially with new gardeners, we like to encourage people to just smother the existing vegetation instead. And we'll show you some of that and the results of that in a minute. So maybe what we'll do first is we could watch the video, and I'll give you, I'll talk over it. There's no sound to the video. So I'm just going to put on the first one. Let me see now. And if anyone has any questions, you're very welcome to ask. So that's our garden, and I recorded that. You see, those are the willows. So we use willows as a shelter belt, and that provides shelter for our fruit trees in the middle of the garden, but also it provides privacy and windbreaking as well. So usually, especially plants that have very big leaves during the growing season, like pumpkins or courgettes, for example, they could get damaged. And that's why we like to try and create a shelter for all those tender vegetables and fruits as well. So that's comfrey, and you can see how the bumblebees love it. I hope you can all hear me back there. Is that okay? Yeah? I wasn't sure if I need a microphone. So this garden is only about 4.5 years old now, 5 years. And it's about an acre and a bit. And we basically started with it in the middle. So I'll show you how we made it in a minute. And we'll just take a quick walk around. You can see all the berries. So those are white currants. We have a lot of different varieties of berries, especially we like berries that are easy to grow. So that's the approach we take. We don't do anything fancy. We're no experts at it, even though we've been doing it for 10 years and we have a lot of videos about it. That's one of our dogs. So we like to smother the grass. You can see that's the path, and here is one of the gardens. So you'll see more of those in a minute. So what we usually start off with is we start off with bare ground, so grass, and we cover it with plastic for 2 months of the summer or 6 months of the winter to smother the grass and the existing vegetation. And those are Josta berries, actually.
The what?
They're Josta berries. Yeah. So it's a Josta berry is just a cross between a gooseberry and a blackcurrant. So they make these giant blackcurrants that are kind of pineapple flavored. So, in my opinion, anyway. Maybe that's just me. Those are kale flowers. We like to grow kale instead of cabbage. You might think that's a bit odd because kale is for cows and cabbage is nice, but actually there is other varieties of kale. There is a lot of varieties, hundreds of varieties. We like to grow perennial kale, and it just grows from a cutting. So you can just stick a cutting in the ground and you get a new plant within 1 season, and next year you can do the same thing again. And the best thing about it is kale, you can just pick it as it grows. So you don't have to wait for it to form a head for 6 months. So that way you have a lot less chances of slugs getting in there, but also you get to pick it a bit by bit. So you have a staggered harvest, so you get to harvest it as you need it. And you get something early on in the season too. And we basically, one thing I like, those are rhubarb flowers. And we like to let them grow. We don't mind if they do because we have other rhubarb plants that are still producing stalks. And some parts of the garden are a bit weedy, but we're working on it. I've just gone full-time on the garden in January, and I actually was working in computers for over 20 years, and I gave up on the job, finally to go full-time on the business. But the business had been full-time for 2 years already. So I just have more time for the business now. And those are actually perennial bulbous leeks. So you can, they're a vegetable from Belgium. So we have all these perennial vegetables. Perennial just means that it'll grow for 3 years and more. It'll keep growing year after year. And an annual would be just a 1-season vegetable, for example. And you can see that's how we grow things. We'll grow a lot of plants like that. But some of our gardens, they usually transition from an annual vegetable garden into this kind of thing where we cover it all with wood chips to stop weed seeds from blown in by the wind. And then we have even less weeding to do. So the idea is that we have a lot less weeding. So we have 95% less weeding when we use no-dig gardening. And we can reduce it a little bit further by using wood chips on the ground. So we're mimicking a forest floor. And so all it is the wood actually turns into compost slowly. The soil life eats the compost. The soil life eats both the compost, but also it improves the compost, and it eats the wood chips as well.
And where'd you get the wood chips, Martin?
Well, any tree services company will provide you the wood chips. And if you give them a call, or an arborist. Sometimes farm services also, but only during the winter time. That's one of our greenhouses. That's the big greenhouse we have at the garden. We have some grapes and figs growing in here. You'll see them here now. And that's a plant called saltbush. It's a very rare plant, and it tastes like spinach, but it's actually salty naturally. And you can see how the figs are growing in there. They do also grow outside as well. And if you've never had a fresh fig, it's an experience because it's so much better than what you get in the shops. And if you pick it fresh, anything that you get from your garden is going to be absolutely fresh because you're picking it and then eating it. So that's one of the reasons why we do the gardening, because what you get in the shop is never going to be as good as what you can grow at home, because it's always going to be a few days old out of the shop. So you're never going to have a fresh product. As soon as you pick the product, it starts degrading in vitamins, in nutrients, and in flavor, of course. It's just homegrown food is flavor that you can't buy for money. And if you have a local farmer's market, or if you knew someone locally that has a market garden that provides vegetables to the public, I would highly recommend trying it, because it may be more expensive, of course, than the supermarkets, but it'll be a lot better for you, and you'll feel better after eating it too, because your body is thanking you for eating something that's nutrient dense, and that's why there's better flavor also. But see, that's the mushroom compost we use. So we get that from Walderstown, usually, or from Brideswell. And we keep it for at least 3 or 4 months in a pile, so that it actually breaks down a little bit before we use it in the garden. And mushroom compost can be used even after 6 months to a year. It breaks down more, and it's even better for the garden. So it doesn't suffer from inflation. It actually becomes better over time. So it's living capital. Compost is actually alive. It's food for the plants. That's what we always say to our 6-year-old child. Compost is food for the plants, and the plants are food for our animals and for us. So I'll show you another video. Do you have any questions at the moment so far?
Do you ever put on therm?
I'm sorry?
Therm on the ground. You put therm, it lets the water through instead of plastic.
Well, one thing we like to do instead, we can also use, instead of plastic, we would remove the plastic before putting down the compost. So I'll just explain it to you real quick. So there's 3 methods to smother the existing vegetation. I don't like to call them weeds, because they all have their function in nature. It's just that they're not useful to us. So when we're smothering the weeds to grow something different, basically all we're telling nature is we don't want those plants. We want to grow something different, something that benefits us more. And so, for example, food, or it could be anything, whatever you want to grow. It could be flowers also. So what we do is one of 3 methods. The easiest one, if you want to get started straight away, you can use brown cardboard from any furniture place or bicycle shops who would have big sheets of brown cardboard. You can put it directly down on the grass. Just make sure you overlap it very well, like at least maybe half a foot or more. And depending on what kind of ground you have, if it's say deep grass in the middle of a field, I would put down 2 layers of cardboard, and you can put the compost on top of it directly. We would put down about 4 to 6 inches of compost, mushroom compost, but it has to be aged already, so that it's not too acidic for the plants that you're going to grow in it. And you can, so then you can grow into that straight away, and the cardboard underneath the compost will stay there, and it'll dissolve over time. It usually takes about 6 months to a year to dissolve completely. And believe it or not, the worms actually eat the cardboard and make the carbon available to the plants that you're growing. So that's one way to do it, and your plants will grow through the cardboard, but the grasses underneath will not come back up. So that's the idea. You're just putting down your compost, and once a year you can mulch your garden beds or your grow spaces with an extra inch of compost. So that's all we do, because if you're taking away fertility in the form of vegetables or produce, you have to put something back into it, because the plants actually do eat the compost. So the compost does get spent eventually, but that's why we usually put down a bit extra in the beginning, so we don't have to bother wheeling it in with a wheelbarrow afterwards. But the other way to get rid of the grass, so this is all the basics of no-dig gardening really, is you can use black tarps or black builder's plastic or silage tarp people would use. Just roll it out, put it on top for 2 months in the summer when it's lovely and hot, so that the weeds underneath get baked, and they'll be gone after 2 months. And in the winter time, it takes longer because the grasses are meant to be dormant at that stage. So it takes a lot longer to get rid of them then. So, and then you can remove your plastic, and then you have just the grass has all gone brown, and you can put down your compost straight on top. And the other way would be poultry or chickens. So we have a chickens and an electric fence and a mobile chicken coop, and we just move it on to other parts of the garden. And when the chickens are done with that ground, the chickens actually eat the weeds, and they scratch up the roots, and then they fertilize it all, the ground. So, and then we move them on, and we can just use that spot as a garden. So for a new garden. So that's how chicken tractoring is one way to expand the garden. But if you don't want to have to keep chickens, you can use either plastic or cardboard instead. Of course, the cardboard is better because you can get started straight away, and you can upcycle materials that would have been dumped otherwise. You know, only so much can be recycled. I think it's far more beneficial to the environment to actually use cardboard, put it back in the ground, put that carbon back in the ground instead of recycling it, actually. Because you are recycling it into the local ecosystem. But growing your own food is probably the best thing you can do for the environment, because all the food from the shops comes from far away. And it has to be shipped in by truck and by airplanes and whatnot. It has to be stored in warehouses and and then, of course, to run the supermarket is another thing. But if you can, as I said, the quality is the main reason why we do it. And so one of the things we do, you know that saying, the old saying, don't give a man a fish, teach him how to fish. So we don't like to sell vegetables like a market gardener, because that's a lot of work, quite frankly. It's 80 hours a week, and it's big money, but you know, I wouldn't be able for it, to be honest. I would prefer to take the approach of just teaching people how to actually grow their own vegetables and fruits and even herbal medicines, and sell them the starts. Like all of the perennial vegetables that we like to grow are rare enough to get, but then again, we're making them available to people so that people can share them out between each other also. Because all of these plants, they can be usually propagated by cuttings very easily, or even a bit of root. You can snip off a bit of the root and you can give it to your friend, and they can grow a new plant out of it. So that's what we do. We didn't bring any plants today, as in just to give to you guys as a gift, but we did bring lemon balm, and there is some there, so you can use it for tea. It's actually a very nice tea, and you can use it as an antihistamine as well. And if you'd like to all bring some of it home, you're very welcome to. We have a lot of lemon balm at the moment, especially since last year. Our garden has really taken off. So I'll show you another video now. This garden I'm going to show you, well, there's a couple of gardens. You remember the garden we saw a minute ago now? So this is what it used to look like only 5 years ago. That's exactly the same place now. That's where the willows were and the dog was running here. So I'll just show you, to give you a little bit of an idea of what it took to make that garden. It took a few loads of compost anyway, and a few loads of wood chips over the years. We just kept adding on to it bit by bit. And it's just a matter of doing your garden as much as you can handle at the time. Now, we don't do raised beds because raised beds require a lot of materials up front. But if you're not able to bend down, and I would prefer not to have to bend down, that's not our horse. That was there before we got the land. But it was all thistles anyway. We would get compost, and that's mushroom compost now. You can see it's very fresh, so it's still steaming. And so raised beds are good if you don't want to have to bend down, but in general, it's only a holding space for compost. You kind of have to refresh the compost. You have to do more watering in a raised bed. But if your ground is waterlogged, you may be better off with raised beds just to drain the roots better, drain the soil. So you can see we had plastic here, and we just dumped the compost straight on top. And we had our good neighbor spread it with a digger. And we often get help with, those are the wood chips. Our other neighbor actually often helps us with the front loader of the tractor. So I'm not wheeling compost by wheelbarrow anymore. I actually moved 20 tons of compost, like a big load like that, before, and it's not fun, as you probably can imagine. But look, if you have muck in the garden, you just cover it with wood chips, and it all goes away, and you can walk comfortably for the rest of the season. So it was so mucky last year. This is only last year, actually. So we just covered the paths in the garden with a sprinkle of wood chips, and that's what the garden used to look like. And then you have clean feet for the whole season, and dry as well. We don't need to wear wellies. So that's the big garden. And that's what the other garden used to look like, and it looked like that last year. Those are pumpkins now. And that's the wood chip island, if you're interested in looking it up on the website. And you'll see videos about it. But we didn't know where to start, so we just started in the middle. So we just made a circle, and now we're going to turn the rest of it into a garden this year. That's the pizza garden. Bianca actually came up with the name. And it actually is kind of the shape of a pizza. People often thought we might be growing ingredients for pizza there, but it's all sorts of vegetables. That's only 2 months after planting, and it's 6 inches of compost we put down. So that's about 12 tons, somewhere thereabouts. Again, we did not do that by hand. So
That's a lot of produce, Martin. How are you getting? You're not selling it.
No. So a lot of it is actually perennial vegetables. So, and also we can feed it to the animals as well. So, there's never going to be a loss. So that's what it looks like. So it took 2 weeks to make that garden, and it took 100 tons of compost, so 6 truckloads. But we had a bit of help. So, we are no dig with a digger. If you want to look up the video, it's called No Dig with a Digger, if you type digger in there. But look at that. That's what it looks like now. And that's early spring now. Like that was 2 months ago. And there's even more of it now. So it's all growing big now. So we have no-dig potatoes, and you don't need tools to harvest them. And there's videos on that too. And those are the pumpkins. And I've been told not to cut that bit, cut the vine instead. They last longer that way. So that's a Japanese pumpkin called oshikikuri, and you can keep it for 3 months or 4 months in the winter. It stores, so you need to cure them for about a week or two in a dry place.
Sorry, when did you sow them out?
Now. Yeah, around now, after the last chance of frost. That's corn now. That was grown in the wood chip island. You can see how there's a compost layer, and then there's also a wood chip layer on top. And it does very well. You can see there's no weeds here. But that only lasted for 4 years now. And I have to renew the wood chips a little bit. But wood chips are much easier to shovel than compost, I tell you. But you can see it works too. But for annual vegetables like corn, for example, you don't really want to do the wood chips on the ground. It's called lasagna gardening. And that's another one of those vegetables from the Andes. And looks like a dahlia, kind of like a dahlia bulb or stool. And you can eat the tubers, and they're really nice. In the winter time, you can dig them up and eat them, and they're also known as winter apple. So if you cure them, there's a lot of inulin in them. So inulin is actually the main ingredient for diabetic products, and we also sell Jerusalem artichokes, and those have a lot of inulin in them, and you can also cure those in sunlight. That breaks down the inulin and it turns it a bit sweeter. And those are the Jerusalem artichokes now. So it's a tuberous sunflower, and all you do is you plant it, and then in the middle of the summer it looks like that. It doesn't really, it clumps. It's kind of like a bamboo. It just clumps, and we just harvest it back once a year. From the edge, it just grows, it kind of spreads a little bit. But it has lovely sunflowers at the very end of the season, and in the wintertime you have all these stalks out in the garden that the insects can overwinter in. So hopefully they'll still be there. Look at one tuber makes one of those balls of tubers in one season. Now that's with compost. Now, I never dared to plant them straight into compost before, but I did do it that time, so. It's just, these are all like bits and pieces out of other videos, so. We also make wine as well. We actually have a winemaking workshop coming up on Friday, if anyone's interested. So there's a couple of spots left for that. And we use rhubarb too to bulk it out, actually. If we use berries, and we also use elder flowers as well. But a lot of the rhubarb, you can't harvest it after midsummer, as some of you might know, because it becomes poisonous. The oxalic acid travels back down the stalk from the leaves. But this variety it's called Glasscans perpetual, and you can harvest it anytime until October. So we also have elder flowers from American elders, and they have a bit of a vanilla scent. So they're nicer than our European elders here. But the elder season is coming up now, so if anyone would like to know how to make elderflower wine, you're very, very welcome to look up the video on the website. You type in wine on the website in the search, and you'll get a recipe too. That's mint, actually, would you believe it or not? We have 16 varieties of mint now, and that's chocolate mint, and we made, what other one did we make?
Iced tea.
Iced tea is another type of mint, So then we just filter it, and then we have added the sugar while the water is hot. And then you put it into a glass bottle like that. It's called a demijohn, a 5-liter bottle. And you put an airlock on the very top. That stops the air from contaminating the brew. And the brew is actually making CO2, so it's getting rid of bacteria inside it, so it's fine. And you leave it like that in a warm place for 4 weeks, and then it's done. And you can filter it and drink it, or you can age it. So if you age it, it's going to be better. You're better off to age it for 6 to 12 months. We also did some cheese waxing. So you can actually preserve cheese with this wax. This is specially made for cheese wax, for wax and cheese. And you can there's a certain procedure to it, but it's very basic. But that's how people used to keep cheese. Some of you might know the program called Victorian Kitchen Gardens. And they show a lot of that. There's also a YouTube channel, Towns Ends. It's very good. He shows how things used to be done before the advent of electricity. And it's simply because we don't want to have to store a lot of the stuff in the freezer. We'd rather be able to store it in a can, like in a jar, or even if you wax the cheese, it actually ages and it becomes better over time. You know the way extra mature cheddar, for example, is more expensive than regular? That's because it takes longer to make it, to store it. So that's pressure canning. And with that, you can actually, a lot of you are probably familiar with water bath canning. We do pressure canning for low acid foods. So for example, meat or that type of thing. You can keep it safely for years in the jars. We also have a lot of pallet projects. So for those of you who are into that, we built this shed made from pallets to dry wood. That's not the final plastic we put on, that was temporary. And we put, that's our cat, Sheldon. He's always in the picture. He wants to be famous. Well, that's the greenhouse plastic we put over the top, and it worked great. And it's drying the wood in only 1 season. So, you can season wood very quickly, especially pallet wood. We also do events here at Cullion Hall, just down the road. And we do these seed and plant swaps as well. And people can bring in handcrafted items or arts and craftings, anything that people make themselves at home. Anything to do with homesteading as well. That was another event, but we have several. We hosted them for 3 years now. That was our 5th event last Sunday. And this was actually a year ago. That was last year. But you're very welcome. You can also watch videos of all of the previous swap meets down the road on the website as well. And if you'd like to come to the next one, the entry is free for those events anyway. It's a free community event. And even if you don't have any seeds or plants or anything to swap for, you can come along anyway and you'll get to meet people from the area. And like-minded people oftentimes that are also into homesteading as well. And so I just wanted to give you a little example of homesteading, it being a lifestyle of self-sufficiency and producing, or at least covering some of the things that you need, but also producing a surplus that you can sell. It doesn't have to necessarily be food. It could be something that you craft as well. So usually what people would say to us is, oh, you grow your own food, so that means you're 100% self-sufficient. And I said, no, nobody can ever be 100% self-sufficient. You're always going to need other people, and you're always going to need a network, and you're going to need a community to help you, and you have to be involved too. So what I like to say is self-sufficiency and self-reliance are 2 different things. So self-sufficiency is when you're self-sufficient, say, for example, in kale. We have kale grown, and we can produce kale indefinitely, year after year, without having to buy seeds, without having to buy anything else. But as soon as you have to involve outside inputs, it's not self-sufficiency, because then you have to go off-site and get something. So self-reliance is how can you live comfortably without systems of support for a certain amount of time. For example, if you have 2 weeks worth of food in the house, that means you can live for 2 weeks without leaving the house, for example. We had a lot of those cases, of course, during the pandemic there. So that was beneficial to have a bit of extra food on hand, so you don't have to take the risk of going out there. So that's good. And we like to say, for example, we have chickens. We have they produce eggs for us, and we use a very natural way to actually produce them. We supplement some of the feed for them with other things. For example, a more species-appropriate diet for chickens, them being a jungle bird coming from China, and they've been domesticated for thousands of years now. I'm sure the chickens were way smaller when they started off. We also feed them, besides their chicken food, they also get kale from the garden and weeds as well. And they also pick up insects here and there. They have a lot of space to run. So in a CAFO, they usually would feed them only grain, which is not a species-appropriate diet for anyone, especially not humans. Of course, we're all guilty. We all eat plenty of bread and cake and all that kind of thing. So we're not perfect, but it's important to give the animals access to different foods so that they can pick too. So being able to supplement the feed, we can actually say, if we have a month worth of grain stored, that means we're self-reliant for 1 month for eggs, because we can produce our own eggs for 1 month. But if we can supplement 50% of the feed with kale, well, then we can stretch it out to 2 months. So that's the idea. It's kind of that kind of systems thinking, holistic thinking. It's a whole systems design. And the chickens are in a permanent location now. So that means we're not tractoring them. They're not being moved around the garden anymore because we've actually run out of grass out the back. So that's a good problem to have when you're a gardener, because the grasses keep going to seed and they keep creeping into your garden beds. And grass in general is just a nuisance. So we try to not have any of it around if we can. So the chickens have now been moved to a permanent location. So that means they're going to be making muck eventually, especially if it's a wet year, which it hadn't stopped raining before this dry spell. It hadn't stopped raining since July. So that's why we have all this trouble with all the floods, especially in Loch Functional, of course. So what you do then to remedy the muck, to keep the animals clean and healthy, and the eggs clean also, is to just cover the chicken pen with deep litter mulch. That's what it's called. It's just wood chips. And if you can put down maybe 6 to 12 inches, so a foot of wood chips, and that helps them actually, that absorbs all the poop, and they are able to turn that into compost. They keep turning it themselves. So after a couple of years, you end up with the most beautiful compost. And you have the chicken manure mixed with the wood chips being a mixed variety of wood chip, not bark mulch, but the branches, the leaves, and the needles of evergreen trees, and the wood, all of it mixed together. That's why you'd get it from a local tree services company when they have to remove trees that might fall on a house or on a power line, especially after a storm. I'd say you might be able to get some wood chips for free. If you look around and ask, if you see them on the side of the road, you never know. If you tell them, well, would you mind dropping off would you drop off the wood chips just there? There's easy access, you won't get stuck, I swear. So make sure you have good access to your land or your house or your driveway before you bring in a giant truckload of compost or even a big silage trailer full of wood chips or that type of thing, because drivers don't like getting in and out of small spaces. Our driveway is notoriously very narrow, and you'll see some of the videos if you are watching them. It can be a bit of a struggle. It might take you 20 minutes to back it into the driveway. That's what I mean.
Sorry, I just want to add, as Martin was saying, we like to encourage people to start their own gardens. Of course, you can see this area is very big, and we had help from the neighbors. But what we want to do is to show people what can be done, and also encourage them. If you have a small area in your house, maybe start thinking in use and how to use it to grow your own food. Yeah. So don't be overwhelmed for the big scale. Sometimes you think.
Yeah, no, it is. Those are 1.5 acres of gardens we have, but we started very small. So we have a lot of different gardens, and that we show. We just took it one little garden at a time. Especially the pizza garden. If you type in pizza in the website, you'll see there's even a compilation. Actually, we can watch it. We can watch the compilation. I have it here, as it happens. Here's something I prepared earlier. Okay, hang on. So this is just a 5-minute video of how we actually made the pizza garden. And it is just an area the size of an allotment plot, so about 8 by 8 meters or that. Maybe half the size of the hall here, something like that. And you can see how it looks like. So there's actually an hour worth of videos between the 3 parts, but there's also a 5-minute compilation, which this is. So we had the chickens down just to eat some of the grass. But just for demonstrational purposes, we used all 3 methods in this case. Well, look what it looks like after the chickens were on it for 6 weeks. It's a lot better. You have a lot less chances of the weeds coming through. They knock them back a good bit. But you can also put down tarp as well, or any kind of black plastic. It all takes time, but if you want to get started straight away, it's the cardboard method that works best. But if you're planning on doing a garden, say, in a few months' time or next year, you can put down the cardboard. When he used to be more eager to help. But he's still helping a bit now, but the wonders of the world are, back in the day, a wheelbarrow was a thing of wonder. So that's what we do. Make sure you cover all of the gaps, and you can use cardboard. We used to use bales from the farm shops, and it's not worth it. You're better off getting big sheets of cardboard. It's much easier. That's our house there, and that's the garden now. That's what it looks like now. So, well, not now, but at the time. So we covered the entire area with cardboard, and we brought in the compost. You can see what I mean. It's kind of a narrow, especially if you have to back it in. So if you are getting materials delivered, make sure they can get in and out easy. So that's our good neighbor helping us bring the compost from one place to another. So I don't have to shovel it. I don't have to handle it 3 times, like shoveling it, putting it in a wheelbarrow, bringing it there and dumping it out. So instead, I just rake it out. And it's a lot easier. I don't have to lift the compost. As I'm sure a lot of you will agree, it's going to be a lot of work to move 10 or 15 tons of compost, and we did it in a half an hour. So then I can concentrate on other jobs that the machine can't do, like planting it up, for example. Now, we no longer drive on that. We won't be driving on that ever again now. We're just going to top it up with a wheelbarrow now. Once a year, you can do that. But then you need to use wood chips for the paths. So all we do is we found over the years that the easiest way is to simply you can make the big path with only wood chips, but in the middle section I would make smaller paths just walking on top of the compost. Walk them in and then put down the compost. So just to make it easier, and there's no edge to it. So like in a raised bed, the plants on the edge of the garden bed they dry out a lot quicker because they're drained better. But here, the plants near the garden beds, the edge of the garden beds where the paths are, they can actually utilize the space under the paths and grow the roots in underneath. So you're not losing any space.
And we don't use any fertilizer or any pesticide or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things people say, so are you organic? Are you an organic grower then? I always like to respond with this. We don't even use what the organic growers are allowed to use. We don't spray anything. We just want to let nature take its own course. If there is a pest, then we need to manage that. We need to address that in a different way, not directly by spraying something on it. We need to address that in a way by building more biodiversity in the garden, but also bringing in insects that benefit the garden. For example, insectaries are plants that flower for a very long period of time, and they bring in all the beneficial insects. Believe it or not, the insects are flying around all the time, and if they see your garden full of flowers, they'll come to your garden, and if you can get something to flower year-round, or even during the growing season, then they'll stay there. And if you can have the insects over winter, then they're already there next spring. So that's the golden trifecta, I think, if that's where it's at. And all of these, we usually like to plant a few marigolds at the end of the garden bed, and they help to protect the crops too after the insects come in. So this is just a path to the garden, but you can see, look at that, after 2 months of growth. Isn't that mad? That's during the summer though. Those are courgette plants, those are ochas, it's a tuberous vegetable, kind of like the potato, kale. Look how lush it is, it's just, there's a lot of it. Don't get dizzy now, I'm not proud of that bit now. I'm not proud of that, but that's it. So it's a very easy way to produce a lot without having to do any work for it, really. I mean, all we're doing is planting and harvesting, rather than weeding and maintaining all the time. Now, granted, some of the gardens could do with a bit of weeding, all right, at this stage, but that's because last year I was just so busy with a full-time job and a full-time business, and of course the family and the homestead as well. So, and now all we have is, so now I have more time to concentrate on the business.
And curious, Martin, do you ever buy a packet of seeds now, or everything you grow, do you propagate?
Oh yeah, I buy a seed, yeah. So I buy seed. People often ask me, where do you buy your seeds? Like for anything really. I buy a bit of it everywhere, wherever I can get it. But I try to support local places, but also I get seeds from other countries as well. So you can get rare varieties in other places that you might not be able to get locally or even in Ireland. So, but a lot of the vegetables now, a lot of the plants that we grow, you wouldn't need seeds anymore. You're never going to be dependent on having to buy seeds. And the seeds may not be available anymore for those plants. So what you do is, if you learn about plant propagation, which is the multiplying of plants, you can then save varieties that are no longer available in the garden center. Like say, if you have a friend's garden, or maybe their home house, there may be an old rose bush that you can't buy anymore. And it has a bit of nostalgic value too, as well, where you can take a cutting, and if you do the right thing, you can get it to grow, and it'll grow into a new rose bush that you can plant at your new house, for example. So those kind of things are the type of thing you can't really pay for. And it's more a skill rather than being able to spend money on it, you know. So there is a lot of things in this world you can't buy with money, you know. So like one of those things is actually fresh food, you know. Unless you're fortunate enough to have like a market gardener nearby. I'm not a market gardener, but I use some of the techniques for market gardening. But if you have a farmer's market nearby, that's another way to do it. So, and of course, one thing to say about the eggs that we grow are so much better than what you get in the shops. Not only because they're fresher, but also they're unwashed, so you can actually store them. But also they have a lot more omega-3 in it because the birds have space to run. So just that alone, and a more diverse diet as well. So there's going to be a lot more nutrients in it. It's going to be a lot better for you. And when they say eggs are bad for you, it's actually just eggs from a cave or from the shops that are bad for you. It's not real eggs that you grow at home. So does anyone have any questions? Did I explain everything? Did I explain everything?
What herbs now would you recommend to try to use?
Well, herbs are usually, we like to say kitchen herbs are great, and a lot of them are actually medicinal as well. They actually make you better. They can improve your health because so you have oregano, you have thyme, you have rosemary, sage, Coriander is more of an indoor, like, I haven't had much success with it. Parsley is good. So all those kind of herbs that, fennel is good, yeah? All those kind of herbs that grow outside without any attention are the kind of herbs I like, where there is no maintenance required. They just grow year after year. And especially the kind of ones that in our gardens now, because we do practice no-dig gardening, the soil life is a lot happier and healthier, so it actually stays active for longer, deeper into the winter, and it wakes up earlier in the spring. So we get a season extension, kind of like a greenhouse, gives you an extra month at the start and at the back end of the season. The no-dig gardens give you an extension on the season also, but the other thing is if you cover it in wood chips, the wood chips actually act as a blanket and they insulate the ground. So your soil life is active for nearly 12 months of the year. So your herbaceous perennials, which all of those plants are, the herbs, they will actually grow. They'll have good leaves for almost 12 months of the year. A lot of them will have, we don't need to dry them and store them, the leaves. That's the point. So like even lemon balm, we have fresh lemon balm for 10 months of the year. So we don't bother drying it and storing it. But you know, if you want to, you can also just hang it up by a string somewhere at room temperature, not over a stove or a heat source like a radiator. It will evaporate the oils along with it dry it out too quickly. So you're better off to dry herbs slowly over a period of 2 or 3 weeks at least. So you keep some of that flavor and a lot more of the nutrients and the flavor as well. Yeah, so is there anything else we can talk about?
Yeah, just sometimes people often ask us, I don't have much space in my house or in my garden to grow some vegetables or some food. And also it's good to maybe brainstorm in the community collectively an area or a space that everybody could use to plant vegetables or a small allotment with low maintenance. So this could be an idea for, act collectively and have a space to share between everybody with low maintenance.
Yeah, like the garden you have out the front here.
Yes.
Who's in charge of the garden out the front? Somebody, nobody here. Yeah.
Yeah, you were saying that all weeds and that have a function. What function has nettles and thistles?
Well, to protect the other plants. I think a lot of the native plants in Ireland are very aggressive when you think about it. Like the briars, the nettles, the thistles. That's because, why do they have thorns? Why do plants have thorns? Because they have no legs to run away when the animal comes to eat them. So you have the other thing is all plants in nature, all plants are poisonous. They all produce chemicals to defend themselves. But certain animals can tolerate some of those poisons, like omnivores and herbivores, of course. Cows can eat 30,000 different plants around the world. So that's a lot of different plants they can eat. But humans, only a few hundred. So there's actually very few plants that we can eat without a bad, an adverse effect on your body. But
What about caterpillars?
Caterpillars, so they're actually probably, if you grow a lot of kale and a lot of brassicas. Brassicas are cabbage, kale, and broccoli, cauliflower. So the caterpillars come and lay eggs on the cabbage white anyway. Caterpillar or butterfly lays the eggs, and then the caterpillars come and eat all your kale. So what I like to do is I don't get too excited about it when I see the eggs or I see the caterpillars on a leaf. I don't kill them. I just take the leaf, and I just walk away and I throw it in the ditch. And then you can keep that. You can eat that leaf now, and you can go and find something else to eat after that. That's all I say. And it's just there's a lot of caterpillars out there that. There's a lot of caterpillars out there that or a lot of butterflies that are actually very beneficial they're all beneficial. They actually also pollinate as well. They eat nectar from the flowers. So.
But if you interplant different plants, the the beetles or other insects will eat the eggs too. Like
Not the caterpillar eggs.
Yeah, not the
No.
caterpillar. But
But so I observed, say on ducks, for example, I saw a lot of the duck plants now have caterpillar eggs on them, and I don't mind that. I don't mind them eating them.
No.
But so if you can encourage beetles to come to your garden by creating an insect hotel, or maybe just put down wood chips in the garden on the ground, it'll give habitat to all the beetles. And we just recently found out that beetles actually eat slug eggs. Well, that's going to cut out a lot of the slug population. So I'll give you a few quick tips on how to reduce slug pressure. So the first thing is, don't leave dead plant matter around the place. Like, don't just pull out a weed and throw it on the ground, because the slugs come and eat it. They can smell dead plant matter from a mile away. Well, maybe from over there, from 10 meters maybe. So the way we found out was, we had lettuce grown here years ago, and we had a thistle. I pulled up a thistle during the day, left it there, and then went to close the chickens at night, and I looked down with a flashlight, and there was 10 slugs on the thistle, and none of them on the lettuce, because the lettuce was not stressed, it was not dying, it wasn't being pulled up. So the thistle, as soon as a plant gets stressed, the local ecosystem will recycle them. And the same is true for animals too, and probably even ourselves. So what we like to say is, don't throw dead plant matter around. Throw it to your chickens if you have chickens. That's one function of our chickens. They are the compost pile. We don't have compost piles. We just throw them into the chickens, so that they definitely, any weed you throw into the chickens definitely won't come back. So they'll eat all of it, and they'll scratch it as well. So because they're always hoping to find a worm, of course. That's their main objective, is to find worms. As soon as one of the chickens might fly over the electric fence, and they're very smart, they go up on the coop, and then they fly over the fence from there, and they can't get back in. So then I've be chasing them, and just to try and get them to go back in. And that only happens sometimes now. So where were we? Oh yeah, so ways to reduce slug pressure. No, we have an electric fence, and we close the door at night. But we'd like to get an electric door so that it's automatic. It closes when it gets dark, and it opens automatically when it gets bright. But they're a little bit expensive now. But we're gonna get one eventually. Another thing you can do is, again, the slugs are the recyclers of the cold temperate climate. So the best way to not encourage the slugs is, don't leave things around that they might hide under, of course. Like a raised bed, they could hide in behind the wood during the day, and then they come out at night and eat all your stuff. So basically, we grow all of our seedlings, all of our plants that we grow from seed, we grow them in the greenhouse on a table with a tray to catch the water, and we have very dry wood chips on the ground, so the slugs don't come in. Of course, they always find another way, and they actually come in, and when there's condensation on the inside of the greenhouse, they go in, and then they go this way, and then they go down. But anyway, you can reduce them greatly by just growing your seedlings indoors in a greenhouse on a table, and then when those seedlings are good and strong and healthy, you plant those straight out into your no-dig garden beds full of fertility made available to the plant by the soil life, by a healthy soil life. And that includes bacteria, protozoa, and all of the different little critters that are in there, down to the microscopic level, and they all help the plants, actually. So the plants and the soil life engage in something called, what's it called again? That's why I bring my assistant. Symbiotic relationship. Into a symbiotic relationship, so they're feeding one another. So it's the same thing as, say, for example, plants. If you have a compost, it's a nitrogen-rich soil. If you put down compost and no wood chips, so that means it's going to be bacteria-dominated. And if you plant your green vegetables into it, green vegetables need a lot of nitrogen to make the leaves, and they also can produce what? They produce sugar from the photosynthesis, And then they send some of the surplus down to the root zone. It's called root exudates. And they feed the local soil life, and they attract all the bacteria from the area to come to the plant. It's a party. And they basically, the bacteria's activity will actually produce more fertility for the plant. And that becomes food for the rest of them and for all the other critters that are a little bit bigger. And that goes up the soil web. So if you type into Google soil web and go into images, you'll see like a diagram of all the different, it's not complicated, it's just, all it is you're trying to feed the bacteria by topping up the soil, or you're feeding the soil life by topping up your compost once a year, a little bit, mulching on top, not digging it in. You don't have to fork it in, because it's no dig. And the plants help to feed the bacteria also, as well. So it's best to keep the ground covered with plants, at least during the growing season, for the whole season, if you can. It's called canopy gardening, and if there is no space for weeds, nature won't send any weeds. There's no room for them to grow. So if you can prevent all the sunlight from hitting the ground, that's grand. You're very productive, you're very efficient at that point with your grow space that you have, because you're harvesting every bit of sunlight that you can get, and you're stopping the weeds from growing as well. So there is a thing called 7 layers of the forest, and it's all about using up all of the spaces in nature. So all ecosystems peak in a forest system, usually. So if you leave nature alone, anywhere in the world, maybe except for the Antarctica and the desert, it actually peaks it'll always turn into forest eventually. And if you design your garden with that in mind, it actually helps a lot. So you could have a ground cover, for example, we have ground cover plants, like rhubarb, for example, under our apple trees. That stops the weeds from growing under the apple tree, but also we have a shrub layer in the form of a red currant and a black currant. So you can plant them all in the same hole, including the apple tree or the plum tree, and have them all there, and it's called a polyculture. So all the plants, they help one another and they benefit one another. So maybe the plants are even bringing in the insects. You could have some flowers, like great mullein is really good for that. And great mullein is actually very good for medicinal purposes as well. So you can have the leaves for it as a tea, for your lungs, and you can use the flowers as for an oil for ear infections, for example. But you can also attract beneficial insects for several months of the year, like 3 months it'll flower, and it'll have this lovely yellow flower stalk. Have you ever seen great mullein before? It's a yellow flower stalk like that, and in medieval times they used to use the dry stalk to dip it in tar. I'm not sure what exactly, but dip it in tar and then use it as a torch. So there's a lot of history in plants, and it's really interesting to go back and actually study it. It's called ethnobotany. So you can study the uses of plants during human history, recorded history.
Any medicines for yourself?
Yeah.
You do.
And we're not experts, but we know the basics, like things that you can buy in the pharmacy anyway, like echinacea tincture, to boost the immune system when you get sick. Perfect. And it'll cost you €2 instead of 15 for a little bottle of tincture. And it's very easy to do. So yeah, with tincture, all you take is alcohol stronger than 40%. 60-something% would be better, but you can't buy that in Ireland, so unless you have a license. So you can just take gin or vodka, whatever, it doesn't matter really, and you put your dried herbs into it, and then you can leave it somewhere in a dark place for 6 weeks. You have to shake it once a week. Make sure the herb is covered in the liquid so that there's no mold, and then after 6 weeks you can drain it, and you can use it as a tincture for 1 to 2 years, and if you keep it in the fridge especially. So echinacea, valerian is very good for anti-stress in small doses during the day, or you can we don't actually take valerian, but you can have valerian for your sleep as well. You can sleep an awful lot better if you take it half an hour before you sleep, but you can't take it every day. So those two are not tonic herbs. Tonic herbs are herbs that you can take every day, and they'll benefit you overall. They'll not only maybe help you cure one condition that you have identified, but also they will help you in other ways. So tonic herbs are herbs you can take every day. And there's a great channel, Spirit of Health is the name of the channel, if you'd like to write it down. Spirit of Health on YouTube. And the fellow there, they do free classes and they record them. And there's classes on everything about herbalism and things like that. And it's very good. No, it's very good. We like to watch some of them sometimes. So. Yeah. So carrots are the only vegetable that we actually sow directly in the ground from seed. So.
What happens with your carrot flower?
Well, you can interplant garlic and onion. That deters the carrot fly because they don't like the smell of the alliums. And the other thing you can do is actually just one thing. The potato, if you suffer from wireworm in the potatoes, they go through the potato and make it almost useless. So you can interplant marigolds, and that will deter the wireworm in your potatoes. No, I'm just saying this for Tommy now. I'm saying it for you now. Yeah, so I might have told you years ago, I don't know. So yeah, no, interplant marigolds to deter wireworm in potatoes.
And we did not have lights as well.
Yeah, so I like to tell this little story. The house we used to live at, we were growing potatoes, no-dig potatoes for the first time. Of course, I didn't have a clue what to do. I put down a layer of newspaper, and that's not enough. You need to put down cardboard. And we put down the compost, but they grew very well. The potatoes did so well that a couple of months later, or 3 months later, 2 months later into it, they were big and lush and dark green. And the neighbor came over, and he was, what age was he at the time? About 91 years old. And he's a farmer, and he was growing vegetables too in his little plot out the front of the house. And he was asking me, what do you spraying on your potatoes that you don't have blight? Everyone has blight in the area. And I said, we didn't spray a thing. And that's the secret. You just need to have a healthy soil. The plant needs to be healthy, and it's not affected by disease and by pests, so to speak. So he was. Comfrey is very good. Comfrey actually broke my shoulder bone a couple of years ago, and Bianca she juiced using a slow juicer. She juiced the comfrey leaves and put it into a base cream, and I put it on here, and it helped to heal it much quicker. So comfrey is also known as bone knit traditionally, to use to heal bones twice as quick as normal. And sprains as well. But don't ever put comfrey cream or balm on an open wound because it'll heal it too quickly and the body hasn't the time to get rid of the infection. So it's only for internal, like for internal problems like that. So for bones. But no, comfrey is great for the bees. You probably saw the purple flowers earlier with the bumblebees. That was comfrey. And you can grow it from a root cutting like that. We sell them as well, and we sell the plants for comfrey as well. But you'll have it forever. It'll grow into a big plant like that year after year. And in the winter time, you can dig it up, or you can cut off a bit of it, and you can take the roots and just cut it into little pieces, and you can just grow more of it. Or you can give bits of the root to your friends, and then they can grow some comfrey too. So comfrey is beneficial for a lot of things, but bone knit is the main medicinal use anyway. But also it attracts a lot of beneficial insects like the bumblebee, but also you can use it for compost tea. So that means you just take, for example, nettles or comfrey or both are ideal because comfrey is a mineral accumulator. It has a very deep taproot, and it pulls minerals from deep in the ground. Minerals that apple trees, for example, can't reach. So then what people do is they plant comfrey under a fruit tree, and then they chop it twice a year. So the leaves just mulch the ground, and then they feed the tree. So then that's a very easy way to do it if you don't have access to compost. But the compost tea, all it is you take the leaves of the comfrey plant or the nettle, and you put them into a barrel of water or into a bucket of water, and you leave it for a week. And you might stir it, and when it smells really bad, that's when you know it's done. So be careful. And then you just filter it off, and you put it in a watering can, and you can water your plants with it. It's just called liquid feed or compost tea. And I have a video about it from years ago. I must make a new one. So it's good to get these conversations and good questions, because it helps us. Helps us to determine what to do next.
Bianca, do you have any spare comfort cream at all?
Sorry, we spent.
Well, with cream, you can only keep it for so long. You have to keep it in the fridge, I think, up to 3 months, they say. We've had cream for up to a year, no problem. But balms are better. Balms have no water content. So we also teach how to make balms and creams. So it's actually very easy, but I'm sure you can find videos on the internet about it. But with balm, all it is beeswax and an oil, like an infused oil. And then you melt it, and then you put it into your thingy, and then it cools down. And that's it. That's your balm. If you want to make cream instead, you just put a strong tea. It's called a concoction, decoction, and you add it slowly, and then it turns into cream then. But then because of the water content, it might go moldy quicker. So, is there any other questions?
Can I just ask you about getting rid of briars, if you have briars in them? Will putting down cardboard or plastic, will that...
Eventually, yeah. So the best way to deal with it is to cut them off first, get rid of them as much as you can. In our back garden, it was all covered in briars at the beginning, 7 years ago. So again, the same lovely neighbour got in the tractor and scraped them. And then I managed to, you can either cover them with a lot of cardboard, say 3 or 4 layers just in that spot, and then put just 1 or 2 layers in the rest of the garden and put your compost on top. Or you can just cover the briar with something like a bit of plastic or a bit of cardboard just for a year, and then it's much easier to pull up. But usually so the way we dealt with it was all the perennial weeds that grow year after year, they have a much stronger root system and they're much harder to get rid of than the grasses. So what we do is when they come through eventually through the compost, they might come through the cardboard and through the compost next year, but then they're only very lanky, they're weak by the time they come through, and then you can pull them up. You have to keep at them and then you get rid of them eventually. No point in digging them up really, it's too much work. It's better to just cover it and take it slow, and it might take you a year to get rid of the briars. And the thistles, the only advice for thistles I have is before they go to flower, before they go to seed, of course, in midsummer, just pull them up, because then the stalk becomes woody and you can pull them, and just don't let them go to seed nearby. That's all. All right.
That's great. I think that was fantastic.
All right. Thank you.
And Martin and Bianca, thank you so much. And what a fascinating life you live. And that sounds absolutely wonderful. And we're all very curious now. Maybe we'll go home and do something with the cardboard. But it's fantastic.